In the heart of Lombok, Indonesia, stands the majestic Mount Rinjani. Its towering peak pierces the sky, and its slopes are adorned with lush forests and treacherous trails. For centuries, the mountain has drawn adventurers from around the world, eager to conquer its heights. But Rinjani is more than just a mountain, it's a place shrouded in mystery, a place where ancient spirits are said to roam, and where the line between the living and the dead is perilously thin. Our story begins with a seasoned hiker named Tom, who had always been drawn to the most challenging of trails. Tom was no stranger to danger, he thrived on it. So when he heard about Mount Rinjani, he knew he had to climb it. The locals warned him, as they did all tourists, about the mountain's unpredictable weather, its steep cliffs, and the legends of those who had ventured too far off the beaten path, never to return. But Tom, with his confidence and experience, dismissed these warnings as mere superstition. Tom set out early one morning, determined to reach the summit in record time. The first few hours of the hike were uneventful, the trail well-marked and the weather clear. But as he ascended higher, the trail became narrower, the air thinner, and the forest denser. The wind began to howl, and the clouds above thickened, casting an eerie shadow over the landscape. Undeterred, Tom pressed on, even as the trail became increasingly difficult to navigate. The trees around him seemed to close in, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The silence of the forest was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of an unseen bird. But then, as he reached a particularly steep incline, the trail suddenly disappeared. Tom stood there, confused. He was certain he had been following the correct path, but now, there was nothing but dense undergrowth and towering trees ahead of him. He checked his map, but it made no sense, the trail should be right here. Panic began to set in as he realized he was lost. He tried retracing his steps, but the forest around him had changed. The familiar landmarks were gone, replaced by an unfamiliar and unnerving landscape. The trees seemed to have shifted, the shadows growing longer and darker. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread washed over him. Tom called out, hoping to hear a response from other hikers, but his voice was swallowed by the forest. The wind carried his cries away, leaving him alone in the deafening silence. He began to walk, his pace quickening as fear took hold. But no matter which direction he turned, he found only more dense forest. The mountain, which had seemed so inviting, now felt like a prison. As night began to fall, Tom's desperation grew. He stumbled through the undergrowth, his flashlight flickering in the encroaching darkness. And then, he saw it, a faint light in the distance. A glimmer of hope. He hurried toward it, his heart pounding in his chest. The light grew brighter as he approached, and he soon found himself in a small clearing. In the center stood an old, weathered hut, its walls covered in moss and vines. The light was coming from inside. Cautiously, Tom approached the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. There, sitting in the middle of the room, was an old woman, her back turned to him. She was muttering something under her breath, a language he couldn't understand. "Excuse me," Tom called out, his voice hoarse. "I'm lost. Can you help me?" The woman stopped muttering and slowly turned to face him. Her eyes were empty, hollow sockets that seemed to stare right through him. Her face was gaunt, her skin stretched tight over her bones. A cold shiver ran down Tom's spine. Without a word, the woman pointed to the door. Terrified, Tom stumbled backward and ran out of the hut, into the darkness. Tom ran blindly through the forest, the old woman's empty eyes burned into his mind. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to get away. But the forest was unrelenting, its trees seeming to close in around him. He tripped and fell, his body hitting the ground hard. Gasping for breath, he looked up and saw them, figures emerging from the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They were all around him, surrounding him, their faces pale and expressionless. Tom tried to scream, but no sound came out. He scrambled to his feet and ran, but there was no escape. The figures moved closer, their hands reaching out to him. He felt their cold touch on his skin, and then, nothing. The next day, a search party was sent out to find Tom after he failed to return. They combed the mountain, but there was no sign of him. No trace. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. To this day, the locals speak of Tom, the hiker who disappeared on Rinjani. Some say he lost his way, others believe the spirits of the mountain took him. But one thing is certain, those who venture too far off the trail may never find their way back.